Looks like a bunch of people joined, so we can conclude our pre-webinar banter and jump right into it, Nick.
Yeah, no, I'll stop talking about the warm West Coast and the cold East Coast. But welcome everyone to our webinar today. Thank you for joining us. I'm excited to dig into this topic with you, Jason, about how to lower your cost per lead for marketing brands, and a little bit of background, a little bit of intro on me. I'm Nick. I'm the director of brand partnerships over here at Netsertive, and excited to speak with you today, Jason, and get into the weeds of how to lower your cost per leads. And so. But first, I'll let Jason introduce himself. So, Jason, go ahead and take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Lynch. I realize I'm wearing the same shirt as in my headshot. It is not necessarily a signature look as much as it is a coincidence. I'm the head of marketing here at Netsertive, and we're really excited to dive into this topic because it's a question we hear a lot from people. If the lead is high, it's just like a primal visceral reaction. If there's a high cost per lead, that actually may or may not be bad in and of itself, but still people always want a lower cost per lead. And it's true that it does factor into the overall return on ad spend, return on investment, campaign success. So we're going to dive in today to the how to lower your franchise's local cost per lead in 2025. We have some franchisees on, some franchise marketers on, and we're going to have a good time and take your questions. And we will definitely be sharing the deck as well, and recording and a calculator, which I'm very excited about sharing. So tell us a little bit about Netsertive, Nick.
Yeah, a little bit about us. If you're not too familiar with us, our journey starts about 15 years ago, and actually our very first customer was a multi-location and franchise business, which made us realize there's a large set of complexity that marketers are dealing with today, especially when it comes to advertising and trying to reach local customers online. Which kind of leads us into the topic of today's discussion, Jason, and my first question to you, which is, how can you lower the cost per lead and get most out of your budget or most out of your defined budget?
That's a big question. We're going to dive into it today over the course of the webinar. So we're going to look at this from lowering your cost per lead and really starting with the strategy audit. And maybe you've noticed, Nick, that AI is transforming search in 2025. Have you seen the AI overviews?
Yeah, especially when I know Google continues to change their algorithms, and AI is becoming a way bigger part in ranking higher and all that stuff, which I know you're going to get into here in a little bit.
Yeah, and they've been doing it for years, but really they're rolling out a lot more around AI. So there's data-driven audiences, there's more dynamic bidding, there's contextual targeting, and it's really becoming more and more of an AI-driven search experience. And it looks like we can chat, or people can put their
Questions.
questions in the chat. So I would invite people to enter in the chat. We don't have an official poll set up, but we want to talk about the cost per lead. And could you all please do me a favor and go to the chat? And yes, this will be recorded. Someone just asked. Go to the chat and tell me, how are you measuring cost, or how are you measuring your campaign success? Is it cost per lead? Is it return on ad spend? Is it return on investment? What is the KPI that you all look at when measuring campaigns to see, is this successful or not? Would love to see just some comments in the chat that we can see. All right. Yes. I like the lead volume and CPL. I like the cost per appointment. I like the mostly CPL. I like the ROI. Cost per sale. Thank you so much for everyone chiming in. Yeah, it's so interesting. And I say I like it all, because if you have a KPI off the top of your head, that means that you are optimizing for something, right? So whatever you need, wherever you are in your maturity curve, however it is going to work for you to measure your campaign success is great for where you are today, because you have to first look at the cost per lead and then the return on ad spend, and then the return on investment. And it's really, you're far up the data maturity curve if you're able to measure true ROI, including cost of goods sold, et cetera. So I think some of these around cost per appointment are really good,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that just speaks to the customer journey, right? And ultimately, we're about trying to look at the overall customer journey and how we can, uh, you know, continue to monitor those KPIs and improve them along the way. So the point of the cost per lead is that it fits into a much bigger picture, right? And Nick, what would you say with the franchise locations that you work with is a typical budget for a location?
For the on the paid side,
Mm-hmm.
probably around 3,000 a location on the paid side.
3,000. So we have this cost per lead calculator, right? And we can actually look at, and I'm sure you've seen versions of this, but this is really instructive for how we think about optimizing the cost per lead. And so we have levers that we can pull along the campaign strategy and experience and operations side. And it's really, the strategy is, what are we going to do, right? How are we going to target people? And then the experience is, what is the experience that we're providing to our prospects, to our leads? And the operational side is really where you need to ramp up on the ROI, in order to measure ROI. And it's really, the operations is connecting the dots and looping everything through. So if you're just looking at leads, it can be misleading sometimes, because it could look like you're doing great, but that's not necessarily going to tie into sales.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we think about all of the levers that we can pull to lower our cost per lead, they are really, cost per click is a key lever, and that's the targeting and keywords is really what's going to determine the cost per click. It's how competitive is your market? How competitive are the keywords that you're bidding on?
Mm-hmm.
If you're the only plumber in a small town and you bid on a targeted geo, you're going to have cheap clicks. If you are bidding on mortgage keywords in New York City, you're going to have very expensive clicks, right? And then conversion rate is the landing page experience and offers. So what is that experience that you're giving people? What are the offers? And then the business processes, the sales operations, data loops, how you're tying all of those things back together. Those are all part of the equation, all the levers that you have to pull to lower your cost per lead in 2025. And especially in the AI-driven environment that we're in now, the operational side is so important, because Google is really looking to have you set up your funnel correctly, set up your experiences according to best practices, and then let the AI essentially find the best targeted customers for your experience that you've set up. And there's a lot of work that goes into doing that at scale, right? So if we look at the campaign spend per month, we look at average cost per click, let's go with $3, and then the lead conversion rate, let's go with 20%. I'd actually love if people could chime in the chat. What is your average conversion rate on a landing page, if you know it? We won't tell anyone who you are, but that would be interesting to see what people say. I mean, we see 10, 15, 20%, and really is the more, 6 to 10%, someone said 6.4% on form fills. We see that the more targeted, the another 6.1%. So sometimes those are blended conversion rates too. Oftentimes paid can be higher. But the more targeted you are at the targeting strategy level, and then the more targeted your ads are, and the more targeted your landing page is, then the better your conversion rate will be, and the lower your cost per click will be, and ultimately the lower your cost per lead will be. So that's what I love about digital marketing, is because no one metric means anything on its own, right? I'd love for people also. So I'm seeing a lot of 6 to 10%
Yeah.
on conversion rates. Um, I'd love for people to chime in also. Where are you sending your traffic? Are you sending traffic to your homepage or location page, or to an ad campaign specific landing page? So let's just say homepage, location page, or to paid specifically.
Let's see.
Yeah,
Ad.
lots of people
Say
saying,
homepage.
and sometimes if you're a location, the homepage or location page is the best place to send it, because it has your full offer, it's optimized. You might not be doing a lot of different diverse keyword things that could necessitate a location page, store Facebook page, friend dev. Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is, the better that you can optimize the top of the funnel strategy, connecting the dots through the keywords and the ad, that's how you're going to get a higher favor in Google, because you're going to have better conversions and you're going to have a better experience that you're offering people. And Google is going to see the conversions all the way through. So if we take this example and we follow it through with we've got $3,000 per month, we've got $3 average cost per click, we've got a 20%, actually, let's go with,
Yes. Yeah, maybe we put 10.
yeah, 10% lead conversion. This is where it gets super interesting. So the percent of leads that are qualified, let's say, 80%, let's say 15% maybe are just junk, something happened, not a fit. You won't always know that, especially if you only have an email address, or um, you know, if something is obviously a spam submission or something. But you won't always know the qualified level. So it's okay to keep that higher for the purpose of the exercise. And then the percent of leads that engage, let's say you reach out to them and you hear back from 65%, and then the number of people that buy, let's say 20%. So then we have 11 sales per month on this funnel. And so that means, in order to have a solid return on ad spend, this is where it gets really interesting, especially working with franchisees, because oftentimes franchisees want to promote everything, right? Or they want to, like, oh, they have a smallish budget maybe sometimes, and they want to do this and do that, and also target this, and what about that, and do social as well. And it's, just depending on the business, it really is an opportunity for franchisees to focus in on the most profitable item that they can grow with, right, in their business. And a couple ways of looking at this, especially in franchising, is, what is the lifetime value of a customer? Because maybe you have a ticket that's $100, right? There's a salon appointment, or there's a single service of something. But if you look at the overall lifetime value of that customer, oftentimes we see $800, $1,500. And so it starts to really go up. And if you know what the profit margin is on something, let's say it's 60%, and your agency fees are 100 to X% of media spend, whatever your spend is, right? Then you can start looking at, okay, this is making sense. And it really tells you what needs to be true in order for this funnel to work for my business. And so it might be that we look and we say, okay, if we could get conversions up to 20%, right? All of a sudden now we have a uh, 5, almost 6 to 1 return on ad spend, and a almost 400% return on marketing investment, right? So just bumping up the landing page. If we can lower the cost per click to $2, right, then we have an 8 to 1 return on ad spend. So these are the kind of metrics that we want to report up to the board, leadership, to your team. And you can see, with just slight adjustments, it can majorly change how successful your campaign is, keeping other things static. So I think it's really important to have these kinds of the full funnel view in mind, right? When we're thinking about the strategy, because ultimately that is nothing exists in a vacuum. No statistic exists on its own. It's how it relates to the others and ultimately how it relates back to the business, because it is not about any cost per lead metric. It's about how much is it helping the business grow, right? How justifiable is it as a line item in a budget if it's, not exactly driving revenue or if it's
Mhm.
not driving a return.
Yeah,
um,
and Jason, this is great to play around with too, to see and have goals set in place for marketing teams as well as they move forward and have initiatives in place, because you can play around with this and have a conservative view of, let's just say, a 5 to 10%, or kind of what people were saying, like a 6% return or conversion. And then you can also have an optimistic view of like this 20% and see the differences and see what you need to do in order to get to that 20% and reach those goals. And you can also also have conservative and neutral and optimistic. But it's a great way to just play around and see where you need to get in order to reach certain revenue goals, and then have initiatives put in place to help you reach those specific goals.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and someone asked about the paid social, if paid social, is that going to the store landing Facebook page? And that's very likely the case, right? And that's a great place to send traffic as well, because if you're looking at a social funnel, depending on what your um, goals are with that, if it's driving Facebook leads or clicks through to call the store, depending on how that's set up, then that can be a great landing page for that channel. Um, so we've looked at some of these levers to pull, and I think looking at the overall prospect experience audit is another best next step. So does it fit your budget? Does it fit your business? But also, is it meeting delivering an experience that you yourself would click through and convert on?
Yeah, and Jason, we speak a lot about the digital marketing hierarchy of needs, like you see in this graph here, and really how you have to have the strong marketing foundation in place to be able to then layer on top of that when it comes to other internal marketing initiatives. And I know you wanted to add a little bit more context to that.
Yeah, I think people often get very focused on the spend and the budget and the campaigns and the keywords. The reality is, where are you sending people? Right? If you're sending people to a Facebook page, the Facebook page needs to be great. If you're sending people to a landing page, the landing page needs to be great. Otherwise, you're driving a Ferrari to, you know, a tiny home instead of a mansion that matches the Ferrari, right? So it's really about how can you optimize the web content and having the web content in place, because every channel is driving people to the web content or your Facebook page content, right? And then your digital presence around listings, reviews, social, that's also going to send traffic back and build trust, because a lot of brands have multi-session journeys, right? Where they are not just learning about you and then they're going to immediately convert, right? They need, especially if it's a considered purchase where it's a higher ticket item, they need to uh, check you out and visit you multiple times in order to um, in order to convert, right, and build trust. So they're going to check you out on other channels as well. So you don't think about, are my reviews contributing to my cost per lead? But they absolutely are. The whole digital presence as a holistic entity basically contributes to the cost per lead. So all the little things matter, because you don't know the exact path that someone's going to take to your page or to your conversion experience that you're offering. And it's frankly one of dozens of different approaches. So you don't think of all the ways someone can access your content. And same thing with marketing, with continuing your actual digital, where it's email, retargeting, advertising, and then tying it all together. I would say the integrated workflows and data is really underpins this whole thing, because you really have to have that in mind when you're building out your web content and your experience. It's how are you integrating this and tying it back into the, to the whole campaign that you're running. I'm just sorry. I'm seeing Janae wrote she raised her hand, but then I think put a comment in. I don't think we have the ability to unmute people with the settings. She said, preach, wish it was easier to educate owners on how everything impacts their CPL, leads, etc. The journey is not linear and ever evolving. So yeah, I 100% agree. And I think the calculator is a great way to do the education, because people can see it themselves and they know their ticket items, right? They know and typically everyone has their bread and butter services. And so if a franchisee can go in and play with the cost per lead, sorry, my dogs started freaking out or something. I don't know if you can hear them. Maybe Zoom cuts it out, but someone's at the door or something. So yeah, franchisees can go in and play with all of these things, and it'll make them think about their business, because a lot of campaigns can be successful if they're able to deliver a service profitably. So it kind of also comes down to how the franchisee is running the business at the local level, right? Can they optimize the spend and the profit margin and the time spent delivering a service so that it's more profitable, right? And you really are going to be successful in digital if you start with what has to be true for this to work, not let's start buying at the top of the funnel and then 3 months later realize it's not going to work, right? So you really want to just understand the business and how it's going to come together. So the approach here is really, and this is what Netsertive does, this is our sort of reason of being, is localization, in the sense of integrating local tokens into everything so that everything is more personalized. Because this chart on the right shows that with the more something is localized, the better the performance gets. And that's just what we see. That's what we see across the board. Because the more localized something is, the more relevant it is to a person, and the more trust it builds. And then also with Google and Bing, the more localized everything is, the more relevant it is to that user from like a attribution digital standpoint. Because if like your landing pages, for example, have latitude and longitude tagged on it, and it's a commercial intent keyword, and they say, cheapest plumber near me from their phone, Google's going to look at that campaign and see, okay, look, this landing page is near this person. This is a really high quality page, and it's going to serve that ad. So it's all about integrating everything together into localization.
Yeah, and especially when it comes to like seasonality, like how it is now, Jason. You're on the East Coast where it's very cold out right now. I'm in Arizona to where it doesn't get below 60, and I still think it's cold.
Yeah.
So with seasonality, localization is huge, just because I'm not going to buy, like, let's just say you're in retail, I'm not going to go and buy snow gear when I'm living in Phoenix, Arizona, to where it doesn't get below 60. So that's where that localization, as you mentioned, comes into play and really attracting that local consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. And even with creative, right? People think, and they don't necessarily realize how a campaign is set up. And, they use a brand might send out creative to be run to an agency, and it features basement, like a basement in it for a home services ad, and it's running in Florida, and they don't have basements in Florida typically, right? Or like you're saying, running seasonality of, is it matching the local climate, and are you running ads with deserts in them in Arizona? Fine, but in Virginia that might not make sense.
Yeah.
So these are all things. This is a good checklist to work with your partner, your team, and just say, how can we test some of these things around, and how can we localize all of this more? So seasonality, bid strategies, conversion type, and source to revenue. So really looking at how are the campaigns set up, what are we optimizing for, and how's that converting to revenue. I think self-reported attribution can be helpful, but how did you hear about us? If it's a drop down though, I'll say, how'd you hear about us? Google. If Google's the first drop down option and it's a required field, then try moving that to the bottom and see if it's still a number one, because sometimes people are moving moving through, data is not always accurate. So it's better to have open text self-reported attribution, and then even with AI, you can figure out how to normalize it to to audit it. That's my tip there. But for all of these things, I think this is just a good checklist of, are we doing marketing well at the location level? I think this is another thing is and really starting to lead into the operations aspect of it. It's building a localized landing page that's optimized for conversion and data capture. So you should have automatic geolocation on your pages. It just makes it easier for people. Highlighting promotions. Everyone wants a deal, right? That makes a big difference if you have a promotion on a page or not. And people, I've seen, I mean, even selling to audiences that are more affluent, they still want deals on stuff. Everyone wants a deal, right?
Yeah.
So figure out, how can you provide quality content that's localized, do integrated call tracking, capture lead forms, and automatically route to the CRM. And right, so it's providing that highly targeted experience while also connecting the dots back into your system. And even auditing these experiences, you'll come across things that are not set up correctly. I guarantee you there's something that is routing incorrectly in your system, even if it's going to, it's going to an email address and the location actually changed their email setup, and then that folder that routed everything got deleted, and now it's no longer saved as a favorite, and no one saw the leads coming in, right? Every time we talk to a franchise network, there's always stories like that. So just auditing the operations of the lead, right? It's so funny because a lot of times the marketing is viewed as there's a high level story, but actual margin and winning at digital marketing is so detailed and so in the weeds, and you have to just have the attention span for it. Like, you have to go in and look at, or have the right person with the right skill set look at all of the things and make sure that everything is set up correctly, because this is where your franchisees with smallish budgets at the location level, they're going to win or lose based on it just being an airtight loop. It has to be a tight loop with, there's not a margin for error on the budgets.
Yeah, and Jason, is there a way if you can tell, if my landing page is successful or if it's actually hurting conversion rates?
Yeah, I mean, definitely looking at overall, you can compare sometimes if you have landing pages that are not related to campaigns, and comparing organic traffic and how that traffic is coming in compared to your organic, or compared to your paid. But generally, if there's a high bounce rate, if I recommend putting something like Crazy Egg or like a click heat mapping on your page. If people are not scrolling down, the traffic is bouncing immediately, and they're not clicking around anywhere, or they're rage clicking, which is when you're clicking on things without, it's like there's not a button there and they're
Yeah.
rage clicking. Which, if you have prices, it's guarantee, if you have heat tracking set up right now, go look at it, and anywhere there's a price, people are clicking on it because that's just what they do. And so, like, this $1,200 on here, they would just be clicking on, click, 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 click. That's just what happens. So look at how clicks are happening. And if you're not getting any scroll depth, if you're getting high bounce rates, it is very obvious that it needs to be improved. And that is, I would say, is the biggest opportunity to improve is uh, having a really great landing page with a great offer. You'll see conversion rates double just from introducing a new page that's more optimized.
Yeah, and if you're like me too, Jason, I'm always on my phone too. So is there a way to maybe
Right.
make it more mobile friendly as well? Because I know this is a view from the desktop, but
Yeah.
what are some ways to make it mobile friendly?
No, that is seriously such an important point because most traffic is probably coming in on mobile. And
Hmm.
so it has to load quickly. I would say loading speed on mobile is probably one of the most important things. And you can hide elements on a mobile page and make sure that the conversion, either having the form up top or a link to the form, happens quickly, so they know exactly how to convert right when they see it. But yeah, just I would say load speed and taking some of the stuff off of a page and just making it not overwhelming is probably the best thing you can do to convert on mobile, because traffic will bounce so quickly. Um, if if it's like 1,000, 1,000, that was an eternity, you know.
Yeah, we
Seconds
have
is
less
too
patience.
long.
We have no patience now.
Right, exactly. Um, so
Uh,
for
Jason, get into some of these questions. I know Madison had some questions in the chat about performance in Canada and how you geographically dial in non-US markets.
Yeah,
Um,
and I did want to acknowledge Janae provided a tip that Microsoft Clarity is free heat mapping, which is true. Check out Microsoft Clarity. Um, and Crazy Egg is another one that's really popular, or Hotjar. But yeah, Clarity is free. So even if you don't have anything set up, you don't have to push that through. You can just, you know, Microsoft Clarity is cool. Let me see, if they don't have control over the website for a location, how can they make sure that things are working properly? Well, part of that is someone has control over the location website. So making sure that the audit is happening, and you can actually just ask your digital partner to look at the conversions that are being measured. And then with Google Tag Manager, this is a very technical but accurate answer. You can look with Google Tag Manager. There's a testing approach where you can go into that testing audit mode and make sure that the conversions are firing. And you can even drill in on Google Analytics in real time and look at your geo and see, oh, look, I can see myself on Google Analytics and these conversions are firing. So it's just a process of going through and making sure that you do need access to Google Tag Manager and Analytics, but even if you don't control the website, you can still audit it and make sure that it's working. Um, and so, yeah, and same thing with heat mapping. Someone else asked about the toolkit for heat mapping. It's really also, it's if you haven't used heat mapping before, it's just installing some code in Google Tag Manager and then having that capture and record the traffic, and then you log into the heat mapping tool, and then you see everything right there. So it's very simple to install. It literally takes not a long time at all to install it. Um, Someone's asking about performance in Canada and how you geographically dial in non-US markets. Canada has some different laws around targeting and data and overall, but the Google Ads basically works the same in Google. So it's just the same thing where you're figuring out what is your geographic segment and what's your radius and how are you dialing in and targeting. Someone asked, what AI are you suggesting to process data like self-reporting? So you can even do that in ChatGPT. You can upload a spreadsheet and say, normalize this data for, I want to see it by Google, Facebook, Instagram, whatever your channels are, or other, and say, normalize the data and give me a table showing all of the sources that are listed in this self-reported attribution. And just doing that in ChatGPT, you can actually get it to process the data for you, and it's really easy. Um, so let me see here. Yeah, and so if anyone else has any questions, or if you have a question about campaigns that you're running now, definitely reach out to me or to your Netsertive account manager if you're a Netsertive client, and we can help optimize some of these. I do want to get into this operations audit though, because frankly, we've been talking about it. But just looking at high and low performers across locations, I think that is another key thing that we do here. And that's really the benefit of having network wide intelligence, right? Where if you're running, if obviously if you're a franchisee, you might not have the same view, but if you're a franchisor, you want to be able to see across all of your locations and see who has higher return on ad spend, who has higher ROI. And we'll even model out the ROI kind of like this to say, okay, on average, this is an accepted ticket price and cost of goods sold. And then we'll be able to look at the ROI even, and sometimes we'll have the actual ROI too that we'll plug in and integrate that if people have that. So looking at the across locations is so interesting to get that local market intelligence, because you're going to see why is this location outperforming? Why is their return on ad spend so high? Why is their ROI so high? And then you'll see maybe they're very concentrated in a campaign that they tested their way to optimizing, and then we can apply those same learnings to other locations, right? And that's going to lower your cost per lead. And
Yeah,
overall, I think everyone here is, you can tell just by the chat, they're pretty savvy with understanding their goals and metrics. So does your does your vendor know what KPIs matter most to your franchise? And I think that is just so important, that the conversion's not optimized to your franchisee goals by locations. I think that's problematic, because we really partner with franchisees, and it's so important that the sort of maturity and life cycle of the digital marketing is set up so that it's it's going to those profitable services like we talked about here. So maybe it's okay that a lead is higher because that franchisee is using a smaller budget to really get new customers for something that has a long tail on the total, you know, customer lifetime value, or that's just a really profitable service, right? And they're, instead of advertising the obvious thing, they're going after something that's more niche with a smaller budget, and they're going to crush that and acquire new customers that way, who are then going to come back for for other
Jason,
services.
I have a question on that calculator. And just from your perspective, I mean, would you rather have like a high cost per lead, but the conversion rates and the qualified lead is greater, or would you rather have low cost per lead, but then a low conversion rate with low quality?
Well, I would say overall high cost per lead with a high
Yeah,
conversion rate and a profitable service. Even a high cost per lead, low conversion rate, highly profitable service is going to be better than like if you're dealing with a remodeling or a medical procedure, right? And you have $20,000 of profit to play with. There's a lot that you can do there. So I
yeah.
think overall, it's really about aligning to the business and getting um, getting the numbers that to make sense at the end and how they spit out.
Yeah,
Uh,
didn't mean to be as rhetorical as it sounded.
oh no, it's okay. Clearly, I'm quite the nerd about all this stuff. Same thing, I think, with budget allocation, right? Are you uh, evaluating budget efficiency? How can you tell? I think if you have if a channel is one channel is performing much better than another channel, why should you spend more in the channel that's performing well? Campaign optimization. Are you aware how often your campaigns are being optimized? Is it often enough? And I think the biggest red flag is around set it and forget it, right? And we are all about making updates at Netsertive. Our campaigns get updated a lot because there's shared learnings and updates that happen. And we're constantly adding negative keywords, which is one optimization that's so obvious, but people don't do it. So negative keywords being, if you keep getting false basically clicks that don't apply to you, then how can they, how can you make sure that traffic is no longer bidding on, like, Barbie Jeeps, for example? Barbie Jeep is not the same thing as a Jeep if you're a Jeep dealership. So how can you eliminate that click, right? You just add the Barbie negative keyword. So if we go to, yeah, and really also best practices around smart bidding. So this is another question to ask your partner: what bidding strategies are you currently using? Does it make sense with your goals and best practices? So that's a bit of how to lower your cost per lead. I know that was a lot of information, but wanted to open it up. If there's any other questions, please go ahead and add them in the chat. And I think we were able to answer a lot of questions as we went. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no. Yeah, thanks, Jason, for all that insight and knowledge. I know that was the lot for you, but we appreciate everyone else's time today, and we hope we were able to provide you some nuggets and take away from nuggets that you can take away from this conversation. And as we mentioned before, we'll be sending out the recording as well as the calculator that Jason went through, so that you all can play around in that. And then, but if anyone had any additional questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Oh, do we have another question? Okay, here we go, Jason. We have a couple
Sure.
questions coming in. If an agency defines, their success on our campaign by lead volume and CTR, but our definition as an owner is ROI, is that a problem?
I would say that is a problem, because you want to have that aligned, right? So if it's just lead volume and click-through rate, then that is that's just not aligned to what you want. So you need to figure out it might not be possible to know the ROI, because to know the ROI, you have to know the cost of goods sold, who is actually, of your customers, who is closing. So if you know the specific people that are coming in and converting, then you can know the ROI. Madison says, just got here. What did I miss? Yeah, so I think the answer to your question, Mike, is yes, definitely. I would say that's a mismatch and does not allow your agency to optimize for what you're trying to see. Cost conversion, same thing as cost per click. So the cost per conversion is not the same thing as cost per click. The cost per click is actually how much it costs every time they click. And then cost per conversion is how much it costs every time that they actually convert. So the cost per conversion is, if you have $3,000 and you get $2 a click, that's 1,500 clicks. But if your conversion rate is 20%, then it would be $10 per lead. So that's more like a $300 cost per conversion. Down to the cost per, wait, hold on, I think I got twisted up there, because I mixed up the cost per customer acquisition cost and the conversion, right? What are we talking about here? So cost per lead is the second step. So cost per click is the first step, cost per lead is the second. So the cost per lead would just be $10, not 300. So, and with a bang.
Yeah, I know that. I know we're up on time. But again, we'll be sending out, this recording as well as the calculator that Jason just went through. Thank you all again. And again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. But we hope you all have a great rest of your week and a great weekend.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And if you have any other questions, I see some other ones coming in the chat. Definitely reach out and we will connect.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.